This is Tony Franklin here. Well, where's he from? What's the firm? Jimmy Page and Paul Rogers? Back in the big head days. Will you just play that rock and roll? With Joe Kay. Okay?
Oh yeah, just call me Joe, and I can play that rock and roll for you. I wouldn't buy it.
So in 1985, all of the ego conflicts and infighting and excessive drug use and studio pressure and all the normal stuff that successful bands deal with, the pressure from all that became too much for the band and too much for Diamond Dave. And Dave left Van Halen at the height of their power at some point in 1985. David Lee Roth went forward with a solo career with some particularly talented musicians in his backing band, releasing a few albums through the late 80s and into the early 90s. Well, as Van Halen's records typically hit the top of the charts, Roth's became less and less successful each go-round, diminishing returns each time he put out a new product. And as the 80s became the 90s, the glam rock hair metal that David Lee Roth was famous for started to give way to grunge. And his old style of music was becoming out of fashion very quickly. And in 1993, he made some headlines for a rather embarrassing reason. He was arrested for a very low-level marijuana possession out in New York.
Okay, so you think that a $35 pot bust for $10 worth of throwaway Jamaican bunk reefer.
Oh my God.
Which was not embarrassing because, you know, David Lee Roth liked to smoke pot. It was because he was buying weed from the same place that a bunch of college kids were buying from. The thought being, shouldn't this A-list celebrity have a better connection than some street dealer? Well, anyway. The year after that, he released an album called Your Filthy Little Mouth, which was a change of style for him. Unfortunately, it was not what the grunge rock audiences were looking for in the mid-90s, and the record was a bomb. It did not sell. And promptly after that, his label, Warner Brothers, dropped him. He sort of joked calling himself a free agent, but in reality, he needed to make some decisions on what he was going to do musically. And that's where Las Vegas comes into the picture. Las Vegas is a showbiz city, and David Lee Roth felt that he could put together a very tourist-friendly Las Vegas type of show. And it may initially sound odd because the Van Halen rock sound isn't necessarily what one would think of when it comes to Las Vegas, particularly in the 90s, but there was kind of an angle where this made sense. There's a part of David Lee Roth's solo career that is directly inspired by the lounge Rat Pack sound of old Vegas. With these songs, you can draw a straight line from Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack, Tony Bennett, that whole lounge, old Vegas scene, directly to Roth's versions. So there was a part of his career that lent itself very well to the old Vegas lounge style that city's famous for.
Is this new for you, this Vegas thing?
It's brand new. This is something that we started maybe 10 years ago with the Just a Gigolo and the California Girls kind of element. But Las Vegas is what's new. It's what's happening now. It's very hip, you know.
So in 1995, he made a deal to do a residency show at Bally's. Now, I go to Vegas every year. these last couple of times I was there, I stayed at Bally's. And I like Bally's a lot. It's a nice mid-level resort. It's not too expensive, but it's also not, gross or grungy or anything like that. It's a really good place to go if you want to go out to Vegas for a good time, but you are being cost conscious. So it was interesting to find out that this is where he picked for his first residency. And to Roth's credit, both in 95 and today, he put a huge focus on quality. He spared no expense in putting together what he felt would be the best possible Las Vegas show. He started by putting together a 14-piece band to back him up. This band included some musicians from, I believe, the Miami Sound Machine, which was a minor pop act at the time, and a sort of a high-profile sideman in Edgar Winter, who would play saxophone and keyboards. And Edgar Winter, you classic rock fans should know, you would know him from Free Ride or the instrumental jam Frankenstein. So a little bit of star power going on. So in the lead up to this residency, Roth and his new band, which he christened the Non-Stop Blues Bustin' Mambo Slammers, recorded a new version of an old Van Halen song called Ice Cream Man. Ice Cream Man was never a hit single for Van Halen, but it is very much a fan favorite. So I kind of think that was a good choice to pick.
Stop me when I'm passing by. See now on my favors, I can't keep me satisfied. Check it out.
The new band covers Ice Cream Man in the sort of this new big band version, which is meant to kind of tease the show that they're going to be doing at Bally's. Supposedly, Roth spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 of his own money for a music video for that song. And that video would be used for promotional purposes for the residency. That was released in June 1995. The first shows that this band would be playing were not actually at Bally's. They weren't even in Vegas. They were in State Line, Nevada at the Caesars Tahoe Circus Maximus Showroom. Now, I don't know for sure, but I'm fairly certain that venue, at least with that name, does not exist anymore. They were, I guess, basically warm-up gigs, only 2 dates, October 13th and 14th, 1995. So they play those 2 shows at the Caesars Tahoe, and then a week later they move to Bally's, and they play at Bally's every day of the week from October 19th to the 25th. And if you saw this show, you would see David Lee Roth perform all those loungy, appropriate covers that I had mentioned earlier. That's Live, Just a Gigolo, California Girls. And you would hear him play some Van Halen songs like Jump, that version of Ice Cream Man they did, obviously, and Panama. And also no other Van Halen songs. So he's playing the couple of covers that were from his solo career and only 3 Van Halen songs? Playing that little of Van Halen seems more like a begrudged admission that you used to be in the band, more than something that you were proud of. So I find that to be a little odd. And then the obvious question is, what were the other songs he was playing? Set lists from the time show that he filled the space with more covers. For instance, he would open each show with James Brown's Living in America. At some point in the show, Edgar Winter would play Free Ride, which is good. They would play Otis Redding's Hard to Handle. There's a Steely Dan song in here. So it would be the covers he was known for doing, the handful of Van Halen tracks, and then more covers of songs that he felt were appropriate for a loungy Vegas type of show. When David Lee Roth set up shop in 1995, he ditched the crazy fishnets, assless chaps, leotard outfits he was famous for wearing in the hair metal days. He got himself a haircut, and he wore just very conservative white shirt, white pants, and had short cropped hair. So he looked very conservative. And the show would be these big band versions of cover songs and a couple of Van Halen tunes that would be, in between each song, he would be making innuendos and jokes for the audience. Some people liked this, some people didn't. It was very much supposed to be an old Vegas lounge style of show. It was not supposed to be a Van Halen concert. The Van Halen songs he was doing was almost incidental, almost out of obligation to just, yes, I used to be in that band, so I'll do these, but what I'm really all about now is old Vegas stuff. And at the time, and certainly in hindsight, I don't think it was a good look. I don't know that that's what fans wanted. I don't know that the Vegas tourists were looking for the lead singer of Van Halen to do like a send-up of old Vegas shows when Frank Sinatra and other old Vegas acts who had been doing it for decades were still out there and still doing these shows. I mean, if you're out in Vegas and you want to see that style of show, why not go see the real thing instead of Roth's half-serious, send-up of the whole bit. And if you're a Van Halen fan and you came out to see Roth's show and you got a measly 3 songs and they're not even the hard rock and guitar versions that you were expecting, but instead these sort of like big band goofball versions, I think that would be quite the turnoff as well. Tickets for this show were sold for $38.50, so about $40. And in a 1,400 seat room, even on opening night, reportedly he had only filled about half that. And he didn't play to a full crowd the whole week. I'm going to read you a review from the Las Vegas Sun. The review was called "Roth Amusing as Vegas Act, but Irrelevant." It must have been disheartening for Roth to see a half-empty theater, but he was outwardly optimistic, smiling that rictus smile of his for most of the 90-minute performance. Based on the crowd's demographic makeup and its reaction to his show, it would appear that Roth's is an act without an audience. Roth has become the consummate Vegas entertainer, talented and amusing, but sadly irrelevant. And this sort of speaks to what Las Vegas was considered at the time as far as the entertainment industry was concerned. Las Vegas was still at this time a place where showbiz careers went to die. A place where out of work, burnt out ex-lead singers would go to play for empty rooms in smoky casinos. It was not really a place to be proud of if you're used to being an A-list celebrity talent. That is absolutely not the case today. But at the time, in the 90s, to a degree, it still was. And unfortunately, despite the effort Roth was putting into this show, that's exactly what he was coming off as. So, he gets through his 1 week at Bally's, and I don't know if there was ever talk to do another week or another residency, but they certainly didn't renew any contracts, and that was going to be it. But at some point, shortly after, or maybe even before, he booked a second gig at the MGM Grand, but that wasn't going to happen until the holidays. So he had some time off in October and November. In early November, he did 2 shows at the Foxwoods Casino in Ledyard, Connecticut. Again, just 2 shows. And the interesting thing about those shows is, one, that's where a lot of Van Halen fans saw this show, because when they saw that David Lee Roth was coming to town, I'm sure a bunch of them didn't think, oh, that Las Vegas act, David Lee Roth. They were thinking, Van Halen lead singer David Lee Roth, absolutely we're going to go. And from what I've read on old forum posts, You know, some people who have a high tolerance for Dave's shtick were okay with it, but there were a lot of Van Halen fans who despised this show. And to be honest, I would say that's fair. Now, I think the one reason he might have booked that gig at the Foxwoods Casino was he might have been testing the waters to see if he could turn this Mambo Slammers show into a bit of a touring gig in case the Residency didn't work out. Maybe something like he would bring the Las Vegas experience to other casinos around the country. I don't know if that was discussed or not, just sort of a theory. So, as he was approaching the second stint at the MGM over the holidays of 1995, The Tonight Show with Jay Leno came to Las Vegas for a week, and they, of course, booked Roth as a guest. In it, he plays the big band Mambo Slammers version of California Girls, and then he sits on the couch with Jay for a bit. The other guest that night was Robin Williams, and I will say thank God for Robin Williams because, and Dave should appreciate him too, because Robin bails Dave out of so many bad jokes that did not play that it makes the interview worth watching. David Lee Roth post Van Halen is very much an acquired taste. If I'm being honest, I sort of cringe when I see him in interviews because he has this shtick about him where the man laughs at his own jokes before he's done telling the jokes. And, you know, sometimes those jokes aren't as funny as he thinks.
What is it, the Hard Rock Hotel, Cafe, whatever? They put the different musicians on the chips and stuff.
Right.
And the $20 chip is like Stevie Ray Vaughan, and the $50 chip is Eric Clapton, and Day After Tomorrow they're putting me on the bagel chip.
Really? Oh, very nice.
Well, I understand that the new Van Halen chip only gets you into the men's room, Jay.
Oh. Oh, that's good. That's good. It's good to see you forgot in the past, but let me ask you.
If you can't tell with the audio, I don't think most people even got the joke. Like, the audience does not react. And Leno seems confused, too. And then just a few minutes later, he makes this little crack about, how attractive the women in his show are.
We've been rehearsing in Miami.
Will those girls be in the show?
They absolutely will.
Really?
Come on, those girls could convince Michael Jackson to quit the Boy Scouts. Man.
Really? Really? Well, you're just making friends all over the place in the music industry.
So the interesting thing about that Michael Jackson joke was not that it, again, did not play. People in the audience are really not laughing at this. In 2019, just last year, Roth did an interview with a Las Vegas podcast called Podcats. And in the interview, they ask him about these old shows he did. And he says that part of the reason, or perhaps the reason, he did not continue at the MGM was over this joke.
I got fired for making the joke that my girls dancing, I had a couple of mambo girls. I was very well into Hispanic influence there. Again, perhaps a little ahead of my time. And a couple of the mambo girls were dancing, and I said, look at them, ladies and gentlemen, so hot, Michael Jackson would quit the Boy Scouts. And they literally fired me for that one. I was out in front with a guitar case in one hand and a shopping cart with my costumes and a top hat in the other.
That ended the run, huh? That ended the gig?
Literally.
I don't think the MGM saw this joke on The Tonight Show and then, terminated any contract. What I believe he means by this is that he was also making this same very joke as part of his nightly shows at the MGM, and they must have gotten one complaint too many. So starting December 23rd and going right through New Year's Eve, David Lee Roth closed out 1995 by playing this Mambo Slammers big band show at the MGM Grand, which still today is one of the premier resorts in Las Vegas. So it was a good venue to play. Michael Jackson joke or not, the MGM Grand did not want to continue this show with Roth. Like at Bally's, he was not filling their theater. And when you have an act that's not particularly successful and is also irritating your guests through tasteless humor or whatever else he was doing, that's sort of a hard act to want to keep around. So they decided to move on, and Roth, to his credit, saw the writing on the wall. At the end of the day, this was an experiment that he had tried at multiple different venues and had, for all intents and purposes, failed to reach an audience. I don't think he put on a low-quality show. I suspect that a lot of people did enjoy the show. I suspect there was some fun to be had. But it wasn't enough to draw a consistent audience. And he has said that he believes that if the casinos had stuck with him, it would eventually have built one. You know, that's a big what if. It did not catch on. And in the entertainment business, catching on quickly is very important for job security. Now, the good news for Roth was that at this very same time, his old band were going through a whole new set of turmoil with their lead singer, Sammy Hagar. And that relationship had finally hit its breaking point, to which, at some point in 1996, Sammy Hagar left Van Halen under bad circumstances, echoing what had happened with Roth 10 years before. With Sammy out of the band, Van Halen had been talking to Dave about releasing a greatest hits album, which included some archive material. And now with Sam out, they asked him if he wanted to come in and re-record or record some new songs or whatever it was to put on the greatest hits compilation. Needing work, and recently, I don't know if Roth gets embarrassed, but recently flaming out of Las Vegas, Roth was happy to sign up for it. And as any Van Halen fan worth their salt knows, this attempted reunion faltered almost as quickly as it started. Basically, they recorded a couple of tracks for the greatest hits, got a round of applause at the MTV Music Video Awards, and then promptly started fighting again, to the point that Roth was jettisoned from any potential future projects. Van Halen continued on. They found a third lead singer and, continued through the end of the 90s. Roth departed this attempted reunion to a career low point, releasing a couple of albums that nobody noticed and stayed pretty much under the radar until Van Halen reunited with him properly in 2007.
Hope you're doing great, and best of luck with your new podcast, Rock the World with It.